All right. That was an introduction to those two. I have written quite a bit more involving those two that I don't think anybody has seen. Okay, let's see if I can find the other one. I haven't done anything with Bayview in a long time. It's probably buried. Oh, oh man, the formatting on this is busted. It's not spaced out right. This could be fun to read. Okay. Wait, what? All right, y'all ready? This is Bayview. This one was written over 5 parts, so you'll notice the breaks in the story. When it was originally posted, it was in 5 different parts. And I've not gone back to clean up those breaks. So here we go. She knew they were watching her. They were always watching. It had been 18 days since she arrived at the Bayview residence. Of course, she would never let any of the others know she was keeping count of the days. Lily? Where are you, Lily? The voice was warm and inviting. Too much so. It always made Lily uncomfortable. Coming, Miss Bradshaw, Lily called out as she turned off the lights in the lavatory. Lily stepped into the hallway and closed the door. Dolly Bradshaw was slightly shorter than Lily, or at least she would be, if it had not been for the lively blonde hair that always defied gravity. Dolly scoffed and shook her head. Not a single hair went astray. Come on now, dear. The woman glanced at her wristwatch. It's 3 minutes past 7. We have a guest for dinner. This is very poor etiquette, Lily. Be sure to apologize before introductions. Yes, ma'am, Lily said with a bow of her head. Lily followed Dolly past the reading area and to the staircase. A male voice carried up from the first floor. Oh, goodness, Dolly whispered. We've missed Monty's prayer. Dolly cast a look of disapproval at Lily. We'll let him finish. And they did. Dolly led the way to the dining table around the banister of the staircase. Monty Philip Bradshaw sat at one end of the elongated table. He was a tall, lean man with prominent cheekbones, and he was dressed all in black, creating a stark contrast to the elaborate colors of his wife's outfit. The chair at the other end of the table was vacant, awaiting Dolly. On the broad sides of the table, there were 3 chairs to each side. 3 young women were seated facing the staircase. The 3 were very similar to Lily. Height, weight, hair color, and features would cause anyone to assume they were related. A fact that had made Lily uncomfortable since she had arrived. The 3 had been there longer than Lily, and they spoke very little to one another. The Bradshaws liked silence. There was only one young woman with her back to Lily and Dolly. Her blonde hair was in a braided ponytail. My apologies for my tardiness, Lily said with a curtsy. I am Lily. Lily tensed as a familiar giggle came from the table. Her heart leapt into her throat as her twin sister turned to look at her. After the awkward family dinner, the girls retired to their room for the evening. Lily and the other girls slept in the spacious attic, where 6 twin-sized beds were arranged evenly. The house rattled from an explosion. Lily's heart leapt into her throat. Her twin sister, Chris, squeezed her hand, and Lily released a breath. You came after the last fireworks show. Astor said after seeing Lily jump from the unexpected explosion. She then explained Monty's frequent firework displays. Monty apparently loved to launch fireworks to celebrate various occasions. Today's Dolly's birthday, Astor informed them. Lily found little sleep that night. She spent most of the next day trying to stay as near to her sister as she could manage, despite their assigned chores. It was at dusk when the fireworks started again. Poppy, the eldest of the 5 nearly identical girls, looked up to the ceiling as if she could see through it. There's always fireworks when the girls come and go. Holly got accepted to that fancy school, fireworks. Then you arrive the next day. She looks at Lily with questioning eyes. Heather, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, looked up from her book. Is one of you leaving? She asked the other girls. They exchanged looks before Poppy spoke. Monty and Dolly said they needed to speak with me about something important. Poppy looked nervous. I'm to meet with them after the fireworks. Heather scoffed. Figured as much. Since they brought in Chrysanthemum, you're 18 now. The Bradshaws have probably arranged a job for you in the city. She raised her eyebrows as she looked to Lily and Chris. Lily squeezed Chris's hand in return. The fireworks continued as the girls fell silent. 2 hours later, the fireworks followed. Dolly and Monty came down the stairs from the Widow's Walk. Poppy dear, Dolly called as they closed the attic. The Bradshaws both had thin, forced smiles that made Lily's hair stand on end. Would you come downstairs with us? We have important matters to discuss with you. Lily and the others exchanged concerned glances. They waited for Poppy to return. As the night wore on, the girls fell asleep one by one. I don't even remember where the actual breaks were because it's not spaced right. This whole thing is just ran together. Lily awoke the following morning to find Astor and Heather talking in hushed tones. The room was dark, but Lily instinctively knew it could not still be night. Lily leaned over to her nightstand and pulled on the pull chain of the lamp. Nothing happened. Power's out, Astor said. This happened when Holly left, too. Why? Lily asked. She looked to her sleeping sister. Lily jumped as the lights flooded the room. Power's back, my dears, Dolly called out while climbing the stairs. We have some news, bad and good. Sadly, Poppy's family had an unexpected death yesterday, and she will not be returning. I'm sure she would have liked to say her goodbyes, but didn't want to wake you. On a positive note, however, Dolly showed a very toothy grin. We have a new guest. The entire family had collected in the sitting room to welcome Violet to the Bayview residence. Lily was actually enjoying herself, despite the fact the girls were taking turns discussing their less than pleasant childhood experiences. With a curtsy to the Bradshaws, Lily excused herself to the restroom. Monty and Dolly nodded, but eyed her suspiciously. As Lily passed Monty's study, her reflection through the cracked door caught her attention. Lily glanced over her shoulders to see if there was someone behind her, then slowly pushed the door open. It was not a mirror after all. It was a large portrait of a young woman nearly identical to Lily. Beneath the portrait, in neat block letters, read, Ivy Bradshaw. Lily did not realize she had walked halfway across the room when the door closed behind her. Monty was now standing between her and the only exit. He stared past Lily to the portrait, his daughter. Well, he said with a sigh, I suppose it's time you knew. He turned to the door and opened it an inch. Dolly, my love, pausing for her faint acknowledgement. I'll be back shortly. Then he motioned for Lily to follow him. The old grandfather clock slid away to reveal a dark staircase. They descended in silence to a simple wooden door. Monty looked at Lily for a brief moment, then pushed the door inward with a groan. Go ahead, he whispered. She did as she was told, too frightened to speak. I'll be right outside when you're ready. He closed the door before she could protest. The spacious room was dimly lit. One wall was lined with bookcases. Hundreds of worn books were stacked this way and that. Some looked as if the spines were on the verge of collapse. As for the remainder of the room, all appeared to be the feature image of a research facility. The stark white surfaces, elaborate medical equipment, and delicate chemistry sets. Everything, except the books, was pristine. A chill ran up Lily's spine when she realized she was not alone in the room. A young woman, reclined on a medical bed, lay motionless. Lily stepped closer. Each echoing step caused her more discomfort. The young woman was facing her, but there were no eyes. Lily wanted to look away from the grotesque image before her, but could not bring herself to do so. The majority of the young woman's body was a charred and bloody mass of what appeared to be fresh scars. Her shaking hand rose slowly from the bed and extended towards Lily. She spoke, a strained effort in a thin, raspy voice. "Help." Tears ran down Lily's face as she trembled, searching for something, anything to say. Then the young woman spoke again. "Kill me." Each syllable came with a labored breath. "Please." Lily was trembling. She held her knees close to her chest and did her best to disappear into the wall at her back. A heart rate monitor was connected to the young woman on the medical bed. Its slow and steady beeping bore into Lily's sanity. Just as she thought she could not take any more, the following beep elongated. Lily looked up with blurred vision to find the young woman motionless. The unchanging sound continued for what felt like an eternity. The wooden door groaned, and Lily could hear footsteps. Her eyes remained fixed on the horizontal line until the screen went blank and the sound finally ceased. Monty turned from the monitor to face her. Lily started but sniffled. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then her nose, before trying to speak again. "I'm sorry for your loss, Monty. Mr. Bradshaw." "That's very sweet of you, dear, as usual." That's very sweet of you, dear. As usual, Dolly's voice filled whatever room she occupied. Her forced smile faded as she took in the scene before her. Dolly focused on Lily and said, in a voice much harder than Lily had ever heard from her, "But Poppy didn't mean much to us." "Honey, there is no need to be insensitive," Monty interjected. "The poor girl's frightened." Dolly lashed out and struck Monty across the left cheek. Lily recoiled from the strike. Monty's pale face reddened. With a heavy sigh, Dolly walked towards the bookshelves that lined the wall near Lily. "I am sorry, my love. This is just so frustrating." Each word barely made it through her clenched teeth. She made an effort of tidying her hair despite the fact that it had remained as pristine as ever. Lily slowly looked between the Bradshaws, then to the wooden door that led to the staircase. She wanted to run. She did not know what these two would do to her or her sister, but she had to escape. Dolly continued to eye the bookshelves with an intensity, clearly looking for a particular book. "Well, darling," she said with the usual forced kindness, "I think it's safe to say the new ways have failed us." She pulled a large, aged, leather-bound book from the shelves. CLM 849 was scribed in black ink on the cover. "The answer can only be found in the old ways." Dolly faced Lily. Her pale eyes were those of a predator. "Of course, it would require more than one life." "Chris, get out!" The words ran together in Lily's panic. She doubted anyone upstairs would even be able to hear her. Lily knew if she could not get to the others, the Bradshaw would repeat whatever torture they had wrought on Poppy. Lily had spared one last glance at the young woman's burned body before sprinting towards the wooden door. Lily slammed into the door. Her heart pounded. She heaved the door towards her. Her head jerked back painfully as Lily found herself looking up at the ceiling from the floor. Dolly stood over her. Several strands of long blonde hair fell from her fingers. Dolly hauled Lily up from the floor by the front of her shirt, then pushed her back into the room. Lily stumbled but kept her feet beneath her. Her palms rested on the cold metal countertop. "That was awfully rude of you, darling," Dolly chided as she closed the door back. Out of her peripheral, Lily saw Monty crossing the room. She could hear the echoing steps of Dolly's heels coming closer from behind her. Lily carefully wrapped her fingers around a glass beaker full of clear liquid. "I promise," Dolly said. The old ways. Lily spun hard to her left, and the glass shattered across Dolly's cheek, soaking her face in the clear liquid, which started to hiss. Dolly recoiled sharply towards Monty and slammed into the counter stretched out between them. Lily attempted a run to the door again. Glass shattered behind her. Monty screamed out in shock. A roar of flames drowned him out. The door swung open, and Lily risked a glance back into the room. Monty was engulfed in flames, and Dolly lay on the floor, flailing and clutching at her face. Dolly struggled to get back up. Her beehive wig rolled across the floor. Wispy white hairs were pressed flat against her skull. Lily ran up the stairs, screaming for her sister. Outside of Monty's study, Violet grabbed Lily by the shoulders and forced her to make eye contact. "What happened?" "Fire," Lily choked out through panicked breaths. Thick smoke was billowing out of the basement and into the rest of the house now. "The Bradshaws. They're dangerous. We have to get out of here." Violet helped Lily get the others out of the house and onto the patio. Violet's eyes darted back towards the flaming house. In a blur of motion, a gun appeared in her hands. "Freeze, Bradshaws," Violet commanded. "You're under arrest." Dolly, appearing from the smoke, pointed at Violet and hissed, "Ad mortem." A twisted smile spread across her blistered face. Violet collapsed in a heap, her features sunken and her skin a sickly gray. The flames, consuming Bayview residents, cast a strange light over her corpse. "Such a waste," Dolly spat. Her gaze fell on Lily. "The rest of you, however, I will sacrifice to bring back my precious Ivy." The heat of the fire was intensifying. Lily knew Chris, Heather, and Aster were behind her, but she did not know where. Violet lay dead a few feet to Lily's left. Lily could see the gun from the corner of her eye. Dolly looked over Lily's right shoulder. "I'll start with your sister so you can bear witness." As soon as Dolly's gaze left Lily, she dived for the gun. Lily aimed at Dolly and started squeezing the trigger. Lily continued squeezing the trigger even after all the bullets had been fired. Another blast echoed as one of Monty's fireworks lit up the sky over the burning building. Dolly lay motionless in a widening puddle of dark blood. Chris, Heather, and Aster pulled Lily away from the gruesome sight. By the time the four reached the street, flashing lights filled the night sky. Police officers and firefighters scurried about in an effort to contain the flames and ensure everyone was safe and out of the house while fireworks continued above. A pair of paramedics. I was doing real good until that. A pair of paramedics escorted a gurney with a blood-soaked sheet towards an ambulance. A manicured hand hung limply from beneath the sheets. Lily cautiously watched as the hand dissolved into dust and the sheet sagged. Particles of dust drifted into the night breeze. The four young women, huddled together under a wide blanket, watched as the fireworks show concluded, marking an end to the Bradshaws of Bayview. Yeah, paramedics. Oh, man. That one was longer than I remembered it being. So, what'd y'all think? Thank you, Halo. Oh, thank you, Bama. Y'all are great. Bayview is one that I want to do a rewrite on and do a short film on it one day. Actually, I kind of forgot about it. Oh, thank you, Paul. Bayview has always been one of those pet projects of mine. I've always loved it, and I've just never had a chance or made the time to go back to it. And I keep working on other projects. But yeah, someday that one's going to be a short film.